Hello everyone, welcome back to the Aspergian Journal. In this short video, I want to address a news topic that's been floating around on social media and been discussed by many people within the autistic community, where there's been articles that's been talking about the relation between autism and extremism. On the face of it, when I first saw this topic being floated around on social media, I immediately, straight away, said that this is a load of rubbish. There is no correlation between autism and extremism. And I have noticed a lot of other autism advocates like myself and are discussing this in great depth and putting their own opinions about it on how divisive and misleading and quite harmful it is, and at trying to pigeonhole autistic people in the same category as people who commit, quite severe acts of hatred and towards innocent people. It's because of the amount of exposure that's been seen on social media. I thought it only felt right for me to address this in a video, not just to only put my opinion across, but also to try and reassure people within the autistic community who might be looking at these articles and information on social media, and they might be finding it distressing, anxious, and causing a lot of mental harm. And I want to do my best to try and alleviate that as much as possible. Before we go further deeper into this, firstly we need to briefly understand what is extremism and what is it really about. According to the UK government, the following definition is what they say is what is extremism about. Extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred, or intolerance that aims to destroy fundamental rights and freedoms, undermine liberal democracy, or intentionally create an environment that fosters these results. It sits on a spectrum, often preceding or supporting various acts of terrorism. Regardless of how you read that statement, but when you look at it, how can you correlate extremism and that to autistic people when based on living experience as an autistic person, and not just from my own experiences but from other people that I've been surrounded with over the years, have never displayed any such thing as extremist behaviour or ideology and that would cause concern and that towards other people. Now, I know there is always going to be an exception and that to any rule, but that applies to any groups of people in the world, not just autistic people. And I think these articles where they highlight about extremism and how certain individuals and groups try and groom or vulnerable autistic children or adults and are into believing their ideology or trying to act in a certain way, and that goes against the autistic individual's character. Now, on one side of it, it is very important to highlight and safeguard those children from risks and of being exploited and that by the individuals or groups, and now that try and promote these adverse and hateful ideologies onto others. But I think it's wrong and quite harmful to allow articles to be written in a certain way that makes autistic children and adults and feel like they have to be criminalised and that for their autistic traits and behaviours, which is absolutely wrong. In the UK, there is a government-backed programme called Prevent, where it talks about safeguarding vulnerable people and from extreme ideologies and various other things which could have a wider societal impact. But the rhetoric of how they're going about talking about this, I think is, in my opinion, I think it's very harmful, and in some ways I think it's miscorrect into where there is a case of like misinformation where they're trying to categorize autistic people in a certain way, which is absolutely the total opposite and to what autistic people really are. As I've said before, there's always going to be an exception to any rule, but for the massive majority of those that are within the autistic community, and that would never even dare dream of wanting to cause harm to others or trying to promote something that could have an adverse effect over on the wider society or community. The only worst thing they could ever do is actually self-harming themselves when they're in pain, like if it comes from like sensory overload or mental health issues. As an autistic person myself, you know, I would never dare dream of wanting to, you know, try and bully or exploit other people and that to build it into something that's adverse or anything like that, because that is against my nature. You know, I'm a conscientious, kind person, and I do care about others, and I want what's best for them. Growing up as a child, and even getting into like my early adolescent years, and I did struggle quite massively, and like with mental health, you know, problems, and also like trying to get the right support when I needed it growing up. You know, my mother and I, you know, fought really hard to try and make sure that I had the support that I needed to be able to get through my school years. Even though it was very difficult trying to get that in place. As time has gone on, in my personal view, I don't think that the support now that the autistic children get in schools, I don't think are any more better now than they were 20 years ago, and when I was at secondary school. And if anything, I think it's even got worse as time's gone on compared to actually getting better. I have so much disbelief in wanting to actually believe any of this stuff and now that these articles are saying or what this government or what the government Prevent programme tries to highlight, because I feel like it's the same old issue again where they're just looking at the textbook side of autism and not really looking at the living experience of what it's like to be an autistic person. And it's not just, these articles where they're talking about the correlation between autism and extremism, but in the last 24 months especially, and there's been a lot of rhetoric, and especially from the United States, about where they're wanting to identify the number of autistic children, and they have to go through some kind of therapy, or to try and mitigate their autistic behaviours. Or there was another one recently, and where they were talking about certain vaccines and that caused autism and in children. All this stuff and information and that is misleading, especially if it lacks any evidence or evidence-backed research. Give us the facts and the figures and that justifies the arguments and that you're putting across. Because all it is just, it's full of empty rhetorical words and phrases that might not have any substance, but to autistic people, it can actually be mentally damaging. And it's just spiking their anxiety even further and distress, because they might see this stuff on social media, and it can have an adverse effect where they get so distressed about it that they don't know how to just let it go and remind themselves of the good people that they are. What I also find so disingenuous is that governments and other organisations put so much effort and resources into developing bad stuff like this, that they're actually not focusing on the real issues and that autistic people face and battle every single day. The lack of resources and that aren't available, and that when they need support. Increasing awareness and acceptance, and now look within educational settings, and that's so autistic children or students and that feel more included in classroom environments where they're encouraged and that to become the best version of themselves, and wanting to achieve more, and help them in the right direction of where they want to go in life, and have more independence and confidence in knowing that, but also having the courage to develop their voice and so they can express their needs and expectations more effectively. All this bad rhetoric and that we're getting from these articles and other political leaders and elites and that around the world and that go on about saying autism is a bad thing and we should be doing more to make them more like neurotypical people. This is really bad way of looking at things, and it's quite harmful, and to the autistic people and who just want to be accepted by society and to be able to have the same equal opportunities that neurotypical people have. It's not hard, but when society is not prepared to listen and understand autistic people and actually make them feel more included, you're just making that autistic person's life experiences more harder and to navigate and towards the goals and dreams that they want to achieve. This is nothing more than another institutional failing that we have seen, especially in the last 30 years, but even longer. And that just highlights the importance of, what I'm trying to achieve, and that with the Aspergian Journal is to move away from this idea that we have to rely on organisations and that to make the changes, and that we need to be able to be accepted in society, and to grow as individuals, when realistically we should be taking ownership of our own personal development and grow individually, and to have that greater confidence and ability, and in whatever we want to achieve in life. My advice to autistic people and who have come across that this huge amount of negativity, regardless of what nature or topic it is about, I want to reassure you that just because it might be on social media and people are talking about certain things that can have a negative impact on us, that doesn't mean that it's true. We know who we are as individuals, and we tell our own truths. We own it and we embrace it. If I took any notice of all this stuff and how people talk about, and then it would be a massive contradiction to the things and that I'm doing as part of this channel, and that to bring encouragement, empowerment and inspiration to the autistic community. Does that make me an extremist? No, it does not. Am I an extremist and to care and wanting what's best for others? No. Does it make me an extremist and to want to share my life experiences as an autistic person to others, and that gives them the encouragement and inspiration, and that for them to grow as individuals in terms of confidence and ability? No. Does it make me an extremist and that of where I know that autistic people can achieve far more than what society tells them, and I encourage them and that to develop as individuals, not in terms of growing as a person, but also accepting who they are, and that so it can work in a harmonious way to whichever direction you want to go in life? No. So my advice to you is, when you see stuff like this that's so negative and it goes against everything that you know about autism, and that not only from within yourself, but also when you interact with others, just say and know in your mind that this is just a load of rubbish, and you know your truth, you know what you're capable of, and you are a great person, and you've got huge potential of where you want to go in life, and the ability to achieve far more. Always remember, a lot of the people who promote all this negativity and they want to try and push us down and keep us like in a certain box in society, and we don't leave it, a lot of them are usually jealous, or they haven't achieved anything in their own lives, so they try and project their own self-hatred and negativity onto others, so they make themselves feel better because they don't know anything else. The only way that you overcome negativity and like how you react to bullies is the opposite of what your instinct and that might tell you. When I used to get bullied at school, And the best thing is to do is to ignore them. Because if you ignore them, then they're going to get tired so quickly that they'll just find someone else and that lot to project their negativity and hatred onto. If you interact with it, you are giving them the validation that they need and that to continue with that pattern of behaviour. And it's the same thing with how you interact and with certain things online. You know, when people put stuff up which is like clickbaiting and that, and there's no substance to it, they're wanting you to look at that and take stuff from what they're saying on board, because then that gives them the validation that they need to continue. But if you take your attention away from that and focus on the things that truly matter, then you will your mind will feel a lot more clearer, and you'll feel more at peace within yourself. Because all this negativity and that is just basically wanting you in a place of distress and anxiety, which is the opposite of what we're wanting to achieve. I want us and that to be in a place of where we are at peace with ourselves and we accept who we are, and we take that proactive those proactive steps and that to wanting to become greater people, and as a result, in terms of confidence and ability. The only way that we combat against this negativity and all this stuff and that's in the news and that's giving autism a bad name is if we stand up together in solidarity in large numbers, and we promote what's best about autism and why we are good people, and we have a lot to give to the world. Never allow anyone or anything stop you from shining your true light onto the world, because your unique gifts and your positive shining star is what is needed in this world more than ever. And even though we do stand together as a community to promote acceptance, positivity and awareness in a good way, and that to help grow the community and our lot in terms of being more supportive and collaborative, and it brings harmony and that amongst autistic people. But it's also equally important and that to look at ourselves as individuals and look at ourselves and provide us with those self positive affirmations that we tell ourselves every single day, and that where we tell ourselves and that we are good people. We and highlight some of the unique strengths and abilities that we have. What makes us the people we are. And even though we do have similarities, and that with us being on the autistic spectrum, but we are individually different. It's very important that we stand up for ourselves more than ever, because, and I've learnt this the hard way in life, that no one else in this world is gonna stand up for you more stronger than yourself. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you would like to see more autism content, please consider subscribing to the Aspergian Journal on YouTube and Substack, so you can be kept in the loop for when new content is released. As always, thank you.